Hello and welcome to What's the Story? We're an inquisitive bunch of hosts from the What's the Story team on a mission to uncover stories about faith and courage from everyday people. And to help us do just that, we get the privilege to chat with amazing guests and delve into their faith journey, the hurdles they've overcome, and the life lessons they have learned along the way. Now, if you enjoy our podcast, don't forget to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter on our website, which is whatsthestorypodcast.com. It's your direct line to the latest episodes and detailed show notes, and they all get delivered straight to your inbox. And the best part, it's absolutely free. What's the Story is brought to you by Crowd Church. We understand that stepping into a traditional church might not be everybody's cup of tea. And that's where Crowd Church steps in, providing a digital sanctuary, a safe space to explore the Christian faith where you can engage in meaningful conversations rather than just simply spectating. So whether you are new to the Christian faith or are in search of a new church family, we invite you to visit us at www.crowd.church. And if you've got any questions, just drop us an email at hello@crowd.church. We're here to help and would genuinely love to connect with you. And now, without further ado, let's meet your host and our very special guest for today.
Hello and welcome to What's the Story? I'm Anna Kettle. I'm part of the Crowd Church team and I'm your host for this episode of What's the Story podcast. Now today I'm joined by guest Claire Thomas. Claire is a registered nutritional therapist and an NLP coach. She has a mission to empower people to look after themselves and enjoy life by making personalised nutrition and lifestyle changes. Now, Claire first developed chronic fatigue /ME in 2012 whilst working as a children's nurse. And at the time, she was told that she would never recover. But as a Christian, she knew God can heal, even though she felt lost in the middle of this life-limiting diagnosis. Until eventually a friend gave her a book that looked at the importance of nutrition, mindset and faith and aided her gradual recovery. In 2019, she went back to uni to retrain as a nutritional therapist. And in 2022, she graduated in personalised nutrition and launched her new business called Nourish to Soar, where she now works supporting clients to achieve results like improved energy, hormone balance, weight loss, better health, and so much more. I'm sure she'll tell us all about it in a moment. But Claire, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to unpack a little bit more of your story because I know there's lots to cover.
Yeah.
You've got background with chronic fatigue, as we just touched on. You've also experienced some infertility challenges and some mental health challenges. And I want to unpack all of that in the next 45 minutes, hour, if we can.
Sure.
I know it's a lot of ground to cover, but I think all of them are really important issues. But let's start from the top. Let's start at the beginning. So would you start by telling us, Claire, a little bit about your early life, how you became a Christian, how your faith journey started, really?
Sure. So I didn't become a Christian until I was 21. I grew up in a household. We did go to church and I remember going to Sunday school, but I don't ever remember thinking like I had a relationship with Jesus. It was just something we did. And then my parents separated when I was 12. And so Sundays became Daddy Day. And I didn't really think anymore about kind of Christianity or anything, of church or anything really. And then when I went to uni to study children's nursing, I suddenly was surrounded by a lot of Christians and they would invite me along to things at, Christmas, Easter, and I'd go. And then towards sort of the end of my degree, I was having a rough time. I think, things had happened and life was just hard. And I remember my friend just going, "Do you want to go to church?" And I was like, "Oh, all right then." I don't know what made me say yes. And she doesn't know what made her ask. Well, obviously she was like, it's probably the Holy Spirit. But, at that point, she just felt that she needed to ask. And it was the most bizarre service I've ever been to in my life. Like at the time, I had no idea what was going on. People were fainting and crying and like just overcome, as the preacher spoke. And now I know it's like they were filled with the Holy Spirit, but at the time, but I don't ever remember being freaked out. I just remember feeling peace. I think I felt like I'd come home, like there was this sense of, this is where I need to be. Like there was a bit of a hole in my heart. And just in that moment, like there was just an overwhelming sense of peace. And that summer I went on a kind of secondment to Toronto as part of uni. Like you kind of go and see other places. And that was the first time I'd really been traveling on my own. And I remember walking through a park in Toronto and just looking at my life. And I think, at that point I could see like there'd been a lot of darkness, a lot of like, struggles with depression up to that point. And I just knew that if I didn't choose God, I wasn't sure what my life would look like and if I actually would be around for much longer. So I just thought I'll give God a try and see what happens. And that was almost 20 years ago. And here I am. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey being a Christian. And there are days where, you feel like you're clinging on by your fingertips. But I think what keeps me going is knowing what it was like before I met God, and knowing that actually, even in the really challenging times right now, it's better than it was without him. So
yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, just amazing that God obviously had his hand on you, because even though you were kind of introduced in quite a crazy service, you weren't put off. So you're obviously really searching at the time, and that's really cool. But I wonder how life looked for you after that, because it hasn't all been perfect since then, has it? And it's that thing of becoming a Christian doesn't equal a perfect life, even though, you did say God really brought a clear sense of hope, and in that sense, life was much better after you found God. But there was still further kind of mental health challenges around depression, and just tell us a little bit more about sort of how the two coincided.
Sure. Yeah, so I think, parts of depression that I was experiencing did lift, but the problem, like now I look back, or it's not a problem, but as I look back, it's hard to know with the depression that I was experiencing, how much was learnt behavior. I grew up in a household with a mum who had severe depression. So how much was it that I kind of picked up what was going on? I've recognized I'm a highly sensitive person. I have possibly got dyslexia. It's not been formally, so there's a lot of things like processing wise that was an issue. And also I now have learned so much about the gut to brain link. And I had glandular fever at 18. So I'd already was living with some form of fatigue. And then I had a huge amount of digestive issues for quite a number of years. So whilst I found God, and that definitely did help, there was that hope, there was that somebody's with me, I think there was a lot to unpick. And that, I'm still unpicking it 20 odd years later around how I think and why I think the way I do, and sort of how to put things in place to help me renew my mind. If you think about be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that's definitely been a battle, that kind of balance between, I know God's with me, and thinking on the word and standing on the word. But so interestingly, like looking back, I think there was quite what now seems like a reasonably calm period. I think as I became a Christian, I definitely became more confident. I went traveling around the world on my own. I had all these experiences. I wouldn't say like, the depression was still there at elements. Like I remember like longing to be in a relationship, and being single was really hard. But it was okay. And then I developed chronic fatigue in 2009, 10. I got formally diagnosed towards the end of 2011. And I think that then started a whole new kind of journey within my faith, because when your health goes, you have to really lean into God. And I am fiercely independent. I think it's still an issue now. Like I'm fiercely independent, and it takes a lot for me to let go and trust. And that's still something that I have to work on.
I think a lot of us do.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So yeah, I think with the chronic fatigue,
Mm.
that was really tough because everything got taken away. So I was very clear on where I was headed. I was going to become an advanced nurse practitioner. And then all of a sudden overnight, I was told I wouldn't recover. And it was that, like, you said in your intro, this middle ground of, I know God can heal, but sometimes he doesn't heal. And at that point,
Mm.
I think like now, I think there is an element of cynicism has come in, especially with the infertility, because at that point I was like, well, God can heal. And there'd been nothing else to kind of compare it to.
Yeah.
But it became a long season of waiting. But in the waiting, like, I learnt more about nutrition. I learnt more about mindset. I learnt more about how to look after myself. And that did, as I became weller, as I recovered, I was that spark, that desire to support others became ignited. And I think
Mm.
I could see, like, there was definitely some challenging moments, but you could almost start to see, like, this will work out, this will be okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. And I think so often we're very good as Christians about talking about healing, like in a miracle moment. But
Yeah,
actually, more times than not, my experience of having been a Christian for a long time too is that God's healing process is slow and he works with us through medicine, through, kind of self-care, through lots of
yeah,
different, types of renewing of mind stuff, like you said. And that it's more of a slow process, more commonly than God just overnight touches someone and they're healed
yeah.
miraculously. Um, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I don't think one is less valid than the other, but we can often feel that way, can't we? So
Definitely.
yeah, it's really important to kind of look at these things, I think, and that's why what you're doing now with Nourish to Soar is so cool. And uh, obviously you did recover eventually, even though you were told
Yes.
that you'd probably never would by medical people at the time. And you're now running your own business that
Yeah.
supports other women in a similar positions. So can you tell us a bit more about that? Like, how did that all come about?
Yeah. So I think, like I've said, with the chronic fatigue, I think, I am a nurse, so I'm very medically minded.
Mm.
And that has changed, I think, with training as over the time to be a nutritional therapist. But, I was like, remember being in the GP surgery and she was like, you cannot never go back to pediatric intensive care. This is it. It's over. Your career is over.
Gosh.
But, like I said, but God heals. So it was really hard to sit in that because I'm very determined and I'm very proactive. And I just couldn't accept that this was it. And I
Mm.
remember like joining Facebook groups with other individuals who had chronic fatigue. And I personally found it not comforting because there was a lot of, this will never change. This is it. And I was like, I can't
Mm.
cope with this. And I think I almost kind of went insular and went, there's got to be a way forward.
Yeah.
And my friend gave me this book that combined nutrition, mindset, and faith. And some of the principles were quite extreme, but I was like, I'm going to do this. And I committed to what it was suggesting. And I saw improvement. And yes, that didn't fully heal me. That came years later.
Mm.
But I think what it did show me is that what I was eating prior to becoming unwell was not nourishing me, was not supporting my health. And
Mm.
actually, the more I invested in eating well, looking at my mindset, because there is a link, whilst chronic fatigue is not a mental health condition, there is a link between physical and mental. And, so
Yeah.
if I was
Yes.
exceptionally fatigued mentally, I would feel weaker. And if I was feeling mentally weaker, I would also feel physically weaker. And there was this kind of cycle. And I learned that actually my body, I'm a hypervigilant individual, so that means I'm always in a state of high levels of stress.
Mm.
And so it's been this constant journey to sort of bring it all together to, like, how do you heal yourself and stay trusting God when things don't work out the way you want them? What can you do in the moment? And I think that's what it taught me. It's like, what can I do? And then let God do what he can do.
Yeah.
And it just really sparked this desire to want other people to not have to be in the position where they're getting a GP, for example, telling them you will never recover. I wanted them to know that there was hope and there was possibility, and it might not look, their healing might not look like my healing, but let's help them in practical ways to how do they nourish their body with the right food? How do they, look after their mindset? All whilst, making sure we're following biblical principles so that it all comes together.
And it's quite extreme, really, when you think about it, isn't it? There's not many illnesses you would get where a GP would say you're never going to recover. I don't think they would say that to cancer patients, or I know there are illnesses like that, but it's like, at very least, you would think it would be more, the focus would be on managing a long-term condition well and staying as fit, like diabetes or asthma. You're not probably going to recover from them, but you can manage that condition and learn to live a full life in spite of it. And it's funny, isn't it? It's obviously a less understood condition perhaps still, but it's so interesting. And so in 2019 then you kind of quit working in the NHS and kind of shifted your focus in terms of your employment into looking at this more full time and this idea of supporting others. So tell us a bit more about that transition and kind of how that all came about.
Well, it was an interesting one. And just as a side note, I think now chronic fatigue is definitely much more understood, and there is definitely a lot more done, thankfully. I mean, because we are talking like 11 years ago. But I'm thankful to say things have improved.
That's good.
I think there's still room for improvement, but things have improved. But in terms of 2019, I got healed in 2018, and so 2019 there'd been a situation at work where my job. So I'd kind of built myself back up. I was at that point a children's nurse educator, so I was teaching in the healthcare setting. And my job changed, and we moved companies, and they were basically like, what you've been doing, you can't do that anymore. And I just remember being like, I can't do this again. I cannot, after I went through what I went through to leave pediatric intensive care, it took a lot to pick myself up. And I don't think I ever fully recovered the passion for nursing. I think I lost it at that point. But I was like, no, I'm a good nurse. I can do this. And I just picked myself up, and I carried on for a number of years. And that happened, and I went, I don't think I can do this anymore. And at that exact moment, I found out what a nutritional therapist was, because I'd been looking at different ways to study nutrition, and nothing had ever felt like it fitted. And I found out what a nutritional therapist was. And I went, that's exactly what I want to do. It's body and mind, and I can bring the spirit into this. And then this, like I say, work changed, and there was an opportunity to leave. And I felt God was like, you've got to go, and you've got to go now. And I was like, but why? I've got plenty of time. This course is, I could start in a few months. And God was like, no, I really need you to go now. And I was like, all right then. So I did. I took a leap of faith, and I make it sound like it was easy, and it wasn't easy. It needed a lot of prayer and a lot of, am I really sure I want to leave the pension? Because it's always about the pension. But also, at that point we were trying for a baby. I got married in 2017. So by that point we were trying for a baby. So we were like maternity pay. There was a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, because it's stability, isn't it? And
it's stability.
Go from a stable NHS job to working for yourself. That's always a huge jump.
It is. But I was like, no, I think I'm just going to do it. All right, I'll do this. And so I took the leap of faith, started another business that's first aid training, which I still do a little bit, but not very much. And then COVID hit 6 months later. And I remember thinking it was a blessing, but not at the same time, because there was an awful lot of guilt about leaving my colleagues in the NHS, but also a sense of relief, because for me, whilst with chronic fatigue, it's not a straightforward condition. I look back and I can look in my past and go, this is what contributed to it. But the main trigger was probably swine flu, which is related to COVID.
Right.
And so I almost think by being out of the NHS, I was protected. And as far as I'm aware, I've never had COVID since.
Yeah.
And there was always there was a slight fear of, if I get this, will I get sick again?
Yeah.
And so I was protected. And also, if I'd have been in the NHS, I'd probably still be there. I wouldn't have left. I'd be like, no, got to keep going. So I think God did protect me, and it was a really hard season. I mean, I think I'm still there really in this challenging season, but I think what I have learned is God was in it in every step. Like there are times that I look at my accounts and I go, I have no idea how I paid for that course, because it was self-funded, because there was no way of getting a loan with this particular course. So it was self-funded. And literally I had no work for months because of COVID. I was doing face-to-face training, but there was just things would pop up and and I would just go, okay, right, let's just do that then. Or at one point I was making face masks because I was doing sewing. And so I was just making face masks to sell, to make money. And bit by bit, like I just kept going and got through the course. And I even had a miscarriage in the middle of this course. But I literally was like, I know where I'm headed. I know that I really want to support these women. So I've just got to keep going. And sort of went through the course. But yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it's amazing because you did graduate and you started your company afterwards. And, I just think it's so inspiring that you've been able to use your own recovery journey and that story and that learning and then turned it into a story of hope for other people, that now you're able to bring some of that hope and that experience to others. I think that's amazing. So just, really want to encourage you in that. Like it's just wonderful. And I'm also really interested to hear a little bit about your fertility journey too, because you just touched on it briefly there. You mentioned that you'd had a miscarriage a couple of years into marriage. And, I know that it's something that you're still in the middle of now, actually. And it's also, as you know, it's a subject that's close to my heart too, because I've been through a similar path. So can you tell us a little bit about that? How has that unfolded and has that affected your faith as well?
Sure. Yeah. In all honesty, I think this has probably been the biggest challenge to my faith.
Yeah.
And there have been moments, I don't know if you've ever watched SAS Who Dares Wins, but
I have.
There's it's my husband, I'm just going to give that one to him. But there's a thing where there's armbands, and when you're like, just cannot take it anymore, you take your armband off and give it to the instructor and you leave. And there have been many times I've literally been like, God, I can't do this anymore. And I'm clinging on by my fingertips. So I guess I should give some context to kind of what's happened with the fertility journey. So I was single for a very long time. Like, you know how you've got life goals. Sure. Sometimes I think, give God a plan and then he laughs, or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah,
but in my head,
plans and expectations.
Yeah. In my head, I was going to be married at 25, children by 30. Thank you very much. Yeah. I got married at almost 35. So in my head, I think I'm about 10 years behind.
And I guess some of that delay was because of the chronic fatigue as well, right? Because your life was so limited for a long time and you couldn't socialise and work in a normal way. Yeah.
Yeah, it had a massive impact because dating was like I wouldn't call it a luxury, but it was very much I can only do this if I have so much energy. Yeah. And interestingly, God told me, and I didn't listen, God told me that I wouldn't meet anyone internet dating. And I carried on internet dating because I was like, but that you're supposed, if you want something, you've got to be seen to be doing something. Yeah. And then randomly I was in Scotland and I moved back to Devon. And one day I just walked into a church, shook a guy's hand and went, I'm going to marry him. And that was my husband. And so we got married.
Literally just knew straight away.
Literally shook his hand and was like, that's it. This is my husband. And yeah, that was that really. And so, yeah, so we got married. I was almost 35. And then obviously we had a bit of time together and then we started trying. Now, God had actually given me a promise that I would have a son. And this was before I met my husband. So that was always like at the back of my head that, this promise of a son. And so we started trying and nothing happened. And so after 6 months, because I was over 35, we went and did the tests. And they were like, we can't find anything wrong with either of you that medically. And so we were like, do we do IVF? And interestingly, I'd never had any peace about IVF, not way before I was married. I just had this sense that IVF was not something that I was going to be able to do. And I don't know if that was linked to the chronic fatigue or because my body was, like I said before, is hypervigilant. So the stress, and stress, as we know, isn't very good for fertility.
And it
But
is
I just
quite
never
an
had
invasive
peace.
process, isn't it? And
It is a very
quite a
invasive
full-on
process.
process. Yeah.
Yeah. But my husband, you know, he was really keen to have a look into it. So I was like, I'm going to do this because I don't want to regret it. Because obviously,
Yeah.
once in Devon, once you're 40, that's it. You can't get free treatment. Like
Yeah.
you're allowed a round of free treatment. So we looked into it, and in the meantime, we got pregnant, which was incredible. So about I think 2 years of trying, and that was amazing. But sadly, we had a miscarriage. So we had an early scan because I'd had so many friends go for 12-week scans and find that the baby had died. I was like, I want to do an early scan. So we sadly went and found there was no heartbeat. And that was hard, but I had hope because I chose to have a local D&C, which I would not recommend doing, in all honesty, because I think
that sounds tough.
It was tough. And now I look back and I go, I think there was a lot of trauma associated with that. But I think in my head, I had people saying, you know, I had a D&C, I got pregnant really quickly. A lot of people going, I had a miscarriage, then I got pregnant really quickly. So in my head, I was like, oh, great, I'll do this. It really sucks that, you know, our baby is with Jesus, but it's okay because we got pregnant and that's great and that's amazing.
Yeah.
But then we didn't get pregnant, and we've not got pregnant again. And that, I think, the month after month after month. And then we ended up going back to the IVF clinic because we had an appointment with them. And they basically like, even though you got pregnant, there is no other option for you but IVF. And I was just like, no, I have no peace. I can't do this. No peace. And they were like, are you really sure? Because your time is running out. Again, I guess it comes back. I've just had a thought of like, it feels like being sat with the GP going, you will never recover. And again, it's
exactly,
like, they're not saying it will never happen, but they were like, your time's running out. You know, you're getting older. And I was just like, no, I can't do this. And I must say my mental health, I was grieving, but I think because when we had the miscarriage, I was also in the midst of the degree. I didn't realize how much I was grieving, and we were also in the middle of COVID until I finished my degree. And then I finished my degree and was like, oh my word, I'm broken. Like I felt broken at that point. Like I ended up getting counseling, but it was like a year later because I literally was like head down, getting sad. Like I think things were just getting harder and harder and harder because you know, I was grieving, but it was so hard to kind of know what it was what was happening.
It's a lot to process grief after loss, I think. And it's, you know, that's even, you know, obviously the COVID thing separately and you'd had other issues before that. And I think there is a lot of processing, and sometimes processing comes quite a bit later, doesn't it? And it sort of catches up with you later. But I think, you know, I talk to a lot of women in this space and they talk a lot about that sort of hope and loss cycle, or that hope and disappointment cycle that you're on as a couple that are trying to conceive and facing infertility. Every month it's like hope and then disappointment, hope and disappointment. And it's kind of this endless cycle. And so that it's like disappointment layered on top of like disappointment and on top of grief. And it can be quite intensive when you're like living that reality for a long time. So I'm not surprised that you're saying that is the thing more than anything else that really broke your heart, broke your faith, or came closest to breaking your faith.
I'm still clinging. Even now, I'm still clinging, going, I have no idea what comes next. Because we have looked at fostering and adoption, but again, at this present moment, we don't have peace about it.
Yeah.
And it's not saying that it's wrong. It's just saying, I think we're both exhausted, you know, 5 years of trying and, you know, everything that's happened with, you know, I've run 2 businesses, COVID, everything that's happened. I think we're just exhausted. So we've got to this point of just being like, we want a child, but we're just tired. We're just tired now. So we're clinging to God because I also remember what it was like pre-God, and I don't want to go back to life without God. But it's trying to find, I think this is the hardest part at the moment for us, is finding joy in life without children and going, things like we love to sea swim, and we'll often get a really early train at like 6:30 in the morning down to a local beach, and we'll be like, this is really cool, we don't have children, because we've been able to get a train at 6:30 in the morning. Like, we've had to go really small just to be like, it's okay right now that we don't have children. It hurts, but we have to. And actually, Rob and I, like, we're so strong. Like, if nothing else, I am incredibly thankful, because we joke that neither of us were what each other wanted. If we'd have seen each other on a dating site, because we're 7 years apart in age, he's 7 years younger than me, we'd have just gone, nah, he's not for me, or she's not for me. But I've always known he was the right man for me. And like now, like our relationship is so strong. And I'm so thankful for that through it all, like, I waited for a Christian man. I waited for, someone who knew God. And that is one thing, like, whilst in the singleness, it was hard. I'm so thankful now, like, that I have a man who loves God, because I think I would have lost my faith by now if I didn't have him walking beside me.
Yeah, it's like that ability to walk the path of pain and suffering together, isn't it? Not doing it on your own. And not that we're ever doing it on our own, because I know God's walking with us, but there is that thing about companionship, isn't there? And, I know you're very much still in the middle of the journey and you don't know the final outcome yet, but obviously at the same time, I love that kind of truth that you kind of touched on there, that is like, it's almost like, but what's the other alternative than clinging on to God? It's to go back to the hopelessness of your life before you knew God, and that isn't an option. And sometimes, I've known that as well at points where it's like, where else can I go, God? What other hope in this life do I have except you? And sometimes it is as simple as that, isn't it? Even life's tough, but like, really, what else offers us that kind of hope? So that really resonates, what you're saying there. And I wonder, in all of this, kind of what's kind of one big takeaway, or perhaps one big lesson that you've learned up to now, about life or faith, if you could kind of distill it down to just one thing. I know that's probably hard, but like, what would it be? What would your takeaway be up to this point in your journey? I know it's not done yet.
No, it's not done yet. But I think the biggest thing that God has been teaching me is to almost let go of control, which I find very hard to do. But let go of the it's let go of the outcome almost. It's almost just sitting in being okay to be me right now. I think I've been learning so much recently about trauma from childhood and how that's impacted how I think about God. And so it's almost been kind of, God right now is just going, look, I just want you to be okay to be you. Be okay to be you without children, without the business that you expected, without, everything that you expected. And it's just letting it go and going, okay, I am enough as I am with God, full stop. And whatever comes next, I don't know, but it's like it's almost kind of going, I'm still going to stay hopeful for children and hopeful for, like, the business to be how I want it to be, but ultimately the most important thing is God. And so sorry.
I love that. It's that idea of, like, so many of us are planners, aren't we? And and it's okay to plan. It's okay to have a plan. Like you said, like your life plan to have, get married at 25 and have children at 30. I think my plan was similar, and mine didn't pan out that way either. And but it's okay to have those plans, but it's that idea of letting go of the outcome and just trusting God that actually he has the outcome and he's holding us and he's holding it all in his hands. And kind of is really freeing if you can just sit in that truth, isn't it, in the middle of it, rather than constantly wrestling and stressing about it all. And I know there's moments of stressing and wrestling, but those moments where we just sit and find a peace and relax into God and into trusting him, so much easier. I know I found that to be really true as well. So I think that's really wise, really good advice.
Yeah, and I think at the moment I have literally got to a place of just going, okay, God, at the moment, there's like two big things in my life. There's the business and fertility. It seems like there's those two things. So each day I'm like, God, how are we partnering together today? And what can I do to work towards these goals? So I've not given it a time frame, because I find when there's a time frame, it makes things worse. And I remember reading Corrie ten Boom when she was talking about the concentration camps, and it was very much the sense of those that had a timeline of we'll be out by Easter or Christmas. They were the ones that lost hope the quickest. And that's definitely what I've seen, is that thought of I'll be pregnant by, or this will happen by, and it's not happened. And I've gotten like discouraged, disappointment, struggled with depression, because it's not happening how you want it to happen. So it is that sort of ability to just go, you've promised this. I know the Bible says that you are not someone who lies. You are someone who keeps his promises. And these promises have been given to me from other people as well. It's not just kind of what I believe will happen. And so each day it's like, I can't think about when this will happen, but it will happen. And then it's like, what can I do? Because I do believe that we're not just to sit back and do nothing. But it's not striving. It's just, what can I do to partner with you today? And what steps can I take to work so we're working together? If that makes sense.
Absolutely. I love that. That's really good advice. Well, it's been really fab talking to you today and hearing a bit about your story. And I know we could probably talk about this, to be honest, because we have a lot of overlap in that part of our stories. But obviously we are going to have to bring this to an end. But it'd be really great if you could tell people where they can find you if they perhaps want to connect or find out a bit more about what you're doing in Nourish to Soar, or just want to talk to you and chat informally. Maybe a bit of your story resonates with theirs. Like, how can people find you? Tell us all the ways.
So I'm on Facebook and Instagram under Nourish to Soar. You can also find me on my website at nourishtosor.co.uk. I also offer a free 30-minute kind of chat, just to kind of talk through, sometimes I can give you some quick wins if you're looking at sort of diet and lifestyle changes, or if you just fancy a cuppa and a chat, really, then you can come and say hi, really.
Love that. I love the offer of like a free taster as well. It sounds good to me. Claire, thank you so much for joining us and giving us a bit of your time and sharing your story so generously with us today. It's been great.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Everyone, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you on What's the Story again soon.
And just like that, we have reached the end of another fascinating conversation. Now remember to check out Crowd Church at www.crowd.church, even if you might not see the point of church. You see, we are a digital church on a quest to discover how Jesus can help us live a more meaningful life. We are a community, a space to explore the Christian faith, and a place where you can contribute and grow. And you are welcome at Crowd Church. Don't forget to subscribe to the What's the Story podcast on your favourite podcast app, because we've got a treasure trove of inspiring stories coming your way, and we would basically hate for you to miss any of them. And just in case no one has told you yet today, remember, you are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you have to bear. What's the Story is a production of Crowd Church. Our fantastic team, including Anna Kettle, Sadaf Bainon, and me, Matt Edmondson, and Tanya Hutzalak, work behind the scenes tirelessly to bring you all these fabulous stories. Our theme song is a creative work of Josh Edmondson, and if you're interested in the transcript or show notes, head over to our website, whatsthestorypodcast.com, and whilst you're there, sign up for our free weekly newsletter to get all of this goodness delivered straight to your inbox. So that's it from all of us this week here at What's the Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. We'll catch you next time. Bye for now.